Hey, how's it going, everyone? This is Kuyaneo. I'm here to talk to you about Solus Christus, one of the five solas of the Protestant Reformation. Just for a little bit of background about the solas. They came out of the Protestant Reformation, uh, in response to some of the teachings in the Catholic Church. Um, the solas go back to the Bible for answering questions about faith and assurance of salvation and the nature and person of Jesus Christ. So, let's talk about Solus Christus. Basically, Solus Christus roughly translates into Christ alone. Christ alone, and that is one of the doctrinal foundations that we build our Christian faith on. Um, the reason Solus Christus came into question, or the reason it arose, really was because of some of the teachings that had arisen in the Catholic Church. Some of the people who brought up the issue were Ulrich Zwingli. He was a Swiss reformer out of Switzerland, and Martin Luther, who was leading the Reformation in Germany. So both those guys were addressing issues in the Catholic Church, and one of those issues was the nature of uh, who secures our salvation and who mediates on our behalf. One of the teachings going on in the Catholic Church was you'll hear about this thing called intercession. Intercession is praying on behalf of, right? And so the Catholic Church at this time was teaching that the saints and other people, prophets and the apostles and the patriarchs like the Pope and other people, they intercess on our behalf to God so that they become mediators in our faith, in our relationship to God. And people in the Protestant Reformation just went back to the Bible and looked to what the Bible said, and the answers that they found were that that's completely wrong, and the only mediator between us and God is Jesus. So some of the scriptures we're going to look at, 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 5, and this one's real simple. Just basically says, "For there is one God, and there is one mediator between God and men, the man Christ Jesus." Jesus is the only way to get to the Father. So 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 5, those are the words of Paul. If we go to the words of Jesus himself, this is what Jesus says in in the Gospel of John, chapter 14 verse 6. He says, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." So Jesus is very explicit here. He says, "Except through me." There's no other way to get to. There's no other way to be in communion or in reconciliation with God. No people can do that for you. No saints, no popes, no apostles can do that for you. Only Jesus. You go to, in the Old Testament, Isaiah 50, 52 and 53, we talk about the suffering servant. This is, I think, 600 years before Christ. And so even before Jesus was in the New Testament, we have evidence in the Old Testament about the doctrine of Solus Christus. He bore the sin of many. This is Isaiah 53 verse 12. At the end of verse 12 it says, he bore the sin of many and makes intercession for the transgressors. So it's Jesus who's making intercession for us. It's Jesus who buys us back. It's Jesus who purchases us by his blood in the atonement. And then we can flip to Hebrews real quick. Hebrews says it much better than I do, and the writer of Hebrews constantly refers back to the Old Testament. And when we get to chapter 7, 8, and 9 and 10, I'll just go over the basics, but basically the writer of Hebrews is explaining why Jesus is the better high priest of the order of Melchizedek. He says that Jesus is our great high priest, the greater and the greatest high priest. And in verse 22 of chapter 7, the writer says Jesus is the guarantor of a better covenant. And if you think about what high priests did for the Jewish people in the Old Testament, they would pray for and make atonement on behalf of the people that they were serving. So the line of Aaron, right? The sons of Aaron were supposed to be priests. The Levites were to be a priestly order, and what they did was they prayed for, so they would intercess on behalf of, right? And they would make atonement for. Every year they would have animal sacrifices during the high seasons. They would have to sacrifice on behalf of the Hebrew people, on behalf of Israel, in atonement for their sins. So the writer of Hebrews is actually referring back to that concept of the role of priest. And when we get to chapter 10, the writer of Hebrews says that Christ's sacrifice was once and for all, because he was the great high priest. He was the greatest high priest, and he was the final priest that would pray on behalf of, make intercession for, and provide atonement for his people. It says in chapter 10, verse 10, "And by that will we have been sanctified through the offering of the body of Jesus Christ once and for all." In verse 12 it says, "But when Christ had offered for all time a single sacrifice for sins, he sat down at the right hand of God." Verse 14, "For by a single offering he has perfected for all time those who are being sanctified." And then verse 18, "Where there is forgiveness of these, there is no longer any offering for sin." So we actually rely to Jesus, and we look to Jesus, and he's the only one we look to for the assurance of our salvation. If we look somewhere else, it's saying something about what we believe about Jesus' work on the cross. The basic question for Solus Christus is, do you believe that Jesus' work, what he was doing on the cross, what he was doing and providing for his people, was it complete or incomplete? That's really the main question for Solus Christus, because if it wasn't complete, then we'd be doing other things like praying to saints, or looking to be good people, or I think Kuya John is talking about sola gratia, where it's if it's not by grace alone, then we're working for something. But if we take that and apply it to the cross and Solus Christus, if we believe Christ alone, then we would believe that Christ's work on the cross is complete, one atonement for all sin, effective for the believers who put faith in him. So some questions to ask after that. If you believe in Solus Christus, what does that mean for your response in faith? That's question one. So if you believe Christ alone, what does that mean for your response in faith and your Christian walk? Two, why is Jesus the only one capable of providing atonement for and making intercession for on behalf of us. Another way to ask that question is, why is Jesus the only one who can do this? Why is Jesus the only one who can save? Why is Jesus the only one who can redeem? And you can look in the Bible for that answer. We'll go over it and then talk about it with you. But and the last question is, how do you see communion with the Father now knowing about Jesus' intercession on our behalf? Another way to ask that question is, if you really do believe you're reconciled to the Father, if you believe that you have been made right with God and that you are now in a relationship with God, who is the one who maintains that relationship? Is it you, or is it the one mediator, our Jesus, who intercedes on our behalf? So these are just some questions, and we'll be available to talk to you guys if you have more questions about it. But we just want to give you some history and practical knowledge on some of the doctrines that we believe in our Christian faith, and hopefully this is helpful to you, and I pray that this is a blessing. So hope you guys enjoyed. I'll see you soon. Bye.